So being a slide guitarist who's on the internet, I get comments and messages all the time asking, how do I get a good slide tone? And the first thing I always tell people is everything that applies to getting a good electric guitar tone in general also applies to getting a good slide guitar tone. It's not like it's some separate thing way over here that has a whole different set of rules. That being said, there are a few considerations that come to mind for me in terms of getting a good slide guitar tone specifically. So in today's video, we're going to go over 5 tips to get the most out of your slide tone and guaranteed have a better slide tone than both Rhett Shull and Josh Scott from JHS. Real quick before we get into the 5 slide tone tips, I wanted to talk about my new course, which is called the Slide Guitar Course Standard Tuning Edition. The course has over 6 hours of pre-recorded video lessons, tabs, PDF downloads, backing tracks, and more that teach you everything you need to know to start playing slide in standard tuning on your regular guitar in a wide variety of musical situations, so you don't have to learn any open tunings, relearn the fretboard, or have a separate guitar that's set up just for slide, so you can be a more versatile and well-rounded slide player. The course is a one-time purchase that gives you instant access to all of its contents, and it never expires, so you always have access to it. The link to check out the Slide Guitar Course Standard Tuning Edition is down below in the description of this video. So the first slide tone tip is to drop the pick. All of your typical standard guitar slides, regardless of the material they're made of, add a little extra treble high-end zing onto your tone. So combining that extra treble with the sharp attack of a pick can be a little bit harsh. So one of the best ways to counter that harshness is to finger pick, and specifically pick with the flesh of your fingers, not your fingernails. Playing with the flesh of your fingers softens the attack a lot. Now, I'm playing a telly on the bridge pickup, so it's still going to be bright and zingy, of course, but that was still a lot smoother sounding than the previous example with the pick. Tone isn't the only reason you should finger pick playing slide. Finger picking also gives you way more control over what you're doing and helps prevent strings from just kind of blurring together and sounding like a mess like this. Especially in standard tuning, that can be a real issue when playing with a pick. That's not to say you can't get a good tone or control what you're doing with the slide when you're playing with a pick, but it's just a lot easier to do both of those things with finger picking. That being said, it can be pretty tough to start finger picking if you've never done it before. So if you're having trouble with it, then go to the second link in the description of this video where you'll find one of my YouTube videos where I teach the basics of finger picking. I also teach them in my slide guitar course in more detail than the YouTube video, so check that out too. Tip number 2 is don't use too much gain unless it's fuzz. You know, if you want to play high gain metal with slide for some reason, then I'm not going to tell you not to use too much gain, but in general, too much gain can just completely muddy up your slide tone and just be a crutch that kind of hides potentially bad technique or intonation and things like that. Using a tone like this, for example, I know that was over the top and exaggerated, but still, a tone like that is going to get buried in a mix and just sounds thin and harsh and just is too much. Something more like this right here is about the most gain I would typically use for slide, and to me is just much more satisfying and cuts through a mix a lot better. If you ask me, the fewer gain pedals are in your chain and the more natural of an overdrive sound you have, if you can just plug straight into an amp and crank it, then even better. But in general, keeping it simpler, keeping things natural is always going to sound better with slide and just in general, honestly. The one exception to this, if you ask me, is fuzz. So fuzz is almost in its own separate category from overdrive to me, and if you're just trying to get wild, crazy, unique, different tones with the slide, then fuzz is the best option. My favorite fuzz pedal, which I'll be using today, is the Mythos Golden Fleece AU79 edition that you can buy from Mastery Music. This fuzz is relatively tame as far as fuzzes go, but it is a super inspiring, fun sound to mess with. See, while that has a lot of gain, it's just nice and organic and squishy and full of character, and it just, I don't know, to me it's just more satisfying than just turning the gain way up on an amp or an overdrive pedal. And it's just a more inspiring tone if you ask me. So definitely experiment with some fuzz pedals with slide. Tip number 3 is use a compressor for clean slide tones. Now, personally, I'm not really a compressor pedal guy. I don't use them, but if you're trying to get a good, full sounding clean tone with the slide, compressors can be a very useful tool. Using a pure clean tone with no compression can sound just a little bit lifeless and lack sustain when you're playing slide, kind of like this. It's not bad, but it's just kind of bland and weak sounding. So I don't actually own a compressor pedal, but what I'm gonna do is record another take for you guys and add some compression in post via a plugin in Logic Pro so you guys can get an idea of what it'll add to your slide tone. It might be hard to tell through YouTube, but it basically just adds some life and sustain to your clean slide tone. And if you're trying to get those classic Lowell George infinite sustain, super clean type slide tones, then some heavy compression is exactly what you want. Tip number 4 is don't go overboard with modulation. Now, modulation can be a great way to add texture and width and movement to your tone, but when it comes to playing slide, similarly to using too much gain, it can very easily mask what you're doing and be a crutch that kind of covers up bad technique and bad intonation. For example, again, that was an extreme example, but it just completely covers up everything I'm doing with the slide. This pedal, by the way, is the Fates Chorus by Mythos. Sorry for the lack of brand diversity in this video. I'm not much of a pedal guy, and I'm friends with Zach, so I have more Mythos pedals and everything. So I normally hate chorus and stereotypical 80s, 90s guitar tones in general, but I actually really like this pedal. This can get some really nice, tasteful sounds. But regardless, excessive chorus, phaser, wah, flanger, anything like that completely just covers up your slide tone, and to me is just too much. One modulation effect that sounds fantastic with slide though is harmonic tremolo. If you're not familiar with it, then it was originally a very unique tremolo circuit that came in early 1960s Fender brownface amps. They only used that circuit for a couple years because it was very complicated and involved a lot of tubes and was expensive and hard to make. But the sound of it is this super cool tremolo that has this kind of phasey, almost Univibe-esque sound to it that sounds great with slide. Today I'll be demoing it with the tremolo side of the Strymon Flint, which is honestly probably my favorite pedal of all time. It just has this thick, chewy kind of warble to it, but it's subtle enough that it doesn't completely mask your slide tone. Last but certainly not least, tip number 5 is use your guitar's tone knob. Way too many guitarists, whether they're playing slide or not, are afraid to mess with their tone knob when it is such a useful tool. I see this all the time where someone's playing slide and they have all of their knobs on 10 and they flip to the bridge pickup and it sounds something like this. And just like I talked about in tip number 1, that's a really harsh, trebly kind of sound, even with finger picking. And so what happens is they go, oh, that sounds bad, and then flip to the neck pickup, and then they get this. Which, sure, is a good slide tone. I would use that, but they're missing out on an entire palette of tones that they could be accessing if they would just use their tone knob. So what I'm going to do is use what is essentially my default lead guitar setting, whether I'm using slide or not, which is bridge position, volume on 10, tone knob rolled back to about 5 or 6, and it sounds like this. To me, that is the perfect overdriven slide tone. It growls, it's punchy, it cuts through a mix, but it's not harsh like it was when the tone knob was on 10. I'm playing a Tele today with vintage style pickups, but even if I'm playing humbuckers, P90s, any type of pickup, any type of guitar, that is my default lead sound, and I think way too many people are missing out on that type of sound. That being said, it's not just limited to bridge position sounds. You can do the same thing with the neck pickup, particularly on brighter sounding neck pickups like on a Fender style guitar like this. So that was neck pickup with the tone knob rolled back to about 6.5 or so. And on a single coil guitar like this, it just rounds off that extra kind of stringy, noisy high end that's not really adding a whole lot except just noise. And it just makes for a beautiful neck pickup slide tone that isn't too muddy but also isn't too bright. Like I said before, slides inherently add just a little extra treble zing onto your tone. So turning your tone knob down just a little bit, you don't have to go crazy with it, but just turning it down a little bit can just round out your slide tone, take away that harshness, but still let it cut through a mix and just sound great. So those are my 5 slide guitar tone tips. Try them out for yourself. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if you have any other tone tips that I didn't mention in this video. Also, don't forget to check out my new course, the Slide Guitar Course Standard Tuning Edition, at the link down below in the description of this video. If you could please like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell notification icon to get notified whenever I post new videos. It'll help out my channel a lot. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.